6 commercial vessels have been attacked in the waters around the Strait of Hormuz. 6 ships were struck in a concentrated wave of violence that maritime security analysts are calling the most aggressive disruption of international shipping since the Second World War. Iran has deployed weapons that change everything. Unmanned drone boats, explosive-laden surface vessels that ram into cargo ships at high speed, and sea mines. Silent, indiscriminate killers sitting beneath the surface of the most critical shipping corridor on planet Earth. Waiting for the next tanker, the next container ship, the next vessel carrying the oil and goods that your gas prices, your grocery bills, your heating costs depend on every single day. And while the strait descends into chaos and oil prices surge again, a remarkable piece of intelligence has surfaced. Mojtaba Khamenei, Iran's new supreme leader, the hardliner installed after the war began, reportedly suffered a fractured foot and facial injuries on the very first day of the conflict. Day 1. American and Israeli strikes apparently reached closer to Iran's innermost leadership circle than anyone publicly acknowledged. And yet, with an injured supreme leader, with his country under sustained bombardment, Iran is not folding. Iran is escalating. Mining the strait, launching drone boats at commercial shipping, driving oil prices toward levels that will restructure the global economy. The question is not whether Iran is hurting. Of course, it is hurting. The question is, why is an injured, battered regime still dictating the tempo of this war? And what does it say about the man who started it? Think about it like this. You punch someone in a fight, hard. First swing, you break their foot. You cut their face. And then you stand back and wait for them to collapse. Instead, they look at you, bloodied and limping, and start setting fire to everything you own, your car, your garage, the road your entire neighborhood uses to get to work. And every time you swing again, they do not go down. They light something else on fire. And now your neighbors are paying for the damage. How long before everyone on your street asks, why did you start this fight? What was the plan? Did you have one? Hold that thought, because that is not an analogy. That is a precise description of what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz right now. With no exit strategy, no congressional authorization, no coalition, and no honest accounting from the White House about what this is costing you. Drop your answer in the comments. Does this look like a military operation with a plan, or does this look like a president who threw the first punch without thinking about what happens next? Before we get into the receipts, let me be straight with you. This channel is independent commentary. It does not work for a party. It exists because when ships are burning in the most important waterway on Earth and your cost of living is about to hit levels you have never seen, someone has to lay out the documented facts and connect what is not being connected anywhere else. And here is my genuine concern. We are watching a conflict in which the United States struck hard enough on day 1 to injure the supreme leader of Iran, fracture his foot, cut his face. And that strike did not produce surrender. It did not produce negotiations. It produced escalation, more missiles, more drones, sea mines, drone boats, burning ships, higher oil prices, which means either the administration did not understand what this would produce or they understood and did it anyway without a plan for what comes next. Neither answer is acceptable when soldiers are dying and your cost of living is exploding. Let us rewind the clock. When the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, the stated objectives were absolute. Regime change, destruction of Iran's nuclear capabilities, unconditional surrender. The timeline, 4 to 5 weeks, Iran would be absolutely crushed. Instead, on day 1, strikes reached close enough to physically injure the supreme leader. Multiple reports circulated through intelligence channels and confirmed by outlets including the Times of London indicate Mojtaba Khamenei suffered a fractured foot and facial injuries during the initial bombardment. The strikes either directly impacted a facility where he was present or injured him during emergency evacuation. Let me repeat that. The most protected individual in Iran, surrounded by layers of Revolutionary Guard security in facilities designed to survive exactly this bombardment, was physically injured on day 1. And what happened next should have been the first signal that this war's assumptions were catastrophically wrong. Instead of suing for peace, Iran responded with immediate, sustained escalation. Ballistic missiles at Israeli and American positions, shot drone swarms across the region. And then, the move that changed the strategic equation entirely, Iran began mining the Strait of Hormuz and deploying unmanned drone boats against commercial shipping. The logic from Tehran is devastatingly simple. You destroyed our infrastructure. We will destroy the infrastructure the entire world depends on. You targeted our exports. We will ensure nobody's exports move through the strait. You thought injuring our leader would break our will. Instead, you unified the entire country behind resistance. And here is the strategic irony. The injury to Khamenei, far from weakening the regime, strengthened it. An injured supreme leader becomes a symbol of defiance. A bloodied leader becomes a rallying point. Iran's state media has broadcast images of Khamenei meeting commanders, issuing directives, presiding over Revolutionary Guard briefings. The message to 4 billion people is unmistakable. They hit us with everything they had. They reached our leader himself, and we are still standing. That narrative is worth more than 1,000 missiles. It transforms what could have been a vulnerability into legitimacy that will cement his authority for decades. Receipt number 1. 6 commercial vessels attacked, and the weapons being used have changed the equation. Maritime security firms and shipping industry sources have confirmed 6 vessels struck in and around the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has deployed 2 weapon systems that fundamentally alter the threat picture. First, unmanned drone boats, explosive-laden unmanned surface vessels that ram into cargo ships at high speed, cheap to produce, difficult to detect, devastatingly effective against commercial vessels with no defensive systems. When a drone boat hits a tanker, it can breach the hull, ignite the cargo, and turn an entire vessel into an inferno. Second, sea mines, indiscriminate and extraordinarily difficult to clear. A single mine sits beneath the surface for weeks, invisible to any crew passing above. When it detonates, the damage is catastrophic, and the psychological effect is worse. Once mines are confirmed in a shipping lane, insurance companies pull coverage, shipping lines refuse the transit, and the lane effectively closes. Together, drone boats and sea mines create a layered denial strategy. They do not just attack ships, they attack the willingness to sail. The impact has been immediate. Lloyd's of London and major maritime insurers have dramatically increased war risk premiums or suspended Hormuz coverage entirely. Multiple shipping lines have begun rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope, adding 2 weeks and enormous costs to every journey. Container shipping costs from the Persian Gulf to Europe have doubled. Senator Ed Markey stated, quote, 6 ships attacked, drone boats, sea mines. The Strait of Hormuz is now the most dangerous waterway on Earth. Every dollar of increased shipping cost gets passed directly to American consumers, and Congress still has not voted on this war. End quote. Congressman Seth Moulton, a Marine veteran, tweeted, quote, Iran is mining the strait, launching drone boats at commercial shipping, and our administration's response is to call questions about it stupid. Our troops and our economy deserve better than this. End quote. Here is the detail that puts this in historical context. The last time mines were deployed in the Strait of Hormuz was during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. A single Iranian mine struck the USS Samuel B. Roberts in 1988, nearly sinking the frigate and wounding 10 American sailors. That single incident triggered Operation Praying Mantis, the largest American naval engagement since World War II. 1 mine, 1 ship, 1 massive response. Now there are potentially dozens of mines in the water, 6 ships hit, and the administration has not held a single press conference to address the mining of the world's most critical shipping lane. Receipt number 2. Oil prices are surging again, and this time the ceiling is gone. Iran's sustained attacks on shipping and energy infrastructure have pushed oil into another leg upward. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and independent energy consultancies are openly discussing sustained oil above $150 a barrel, with spike scenarios approaching $200. The drivers are cascading and reinforcing. The Strait of Hormuz is an active war zone. 20% of global oil supply flows through it, and traffic has collapsed. Iran's retaliatory strikes have targeted energy infrastructure across the region. Desalination plants in Bahrain struck. Oil facilities in Kuwait struck. Iraq's oil output has plunged 60%. Qatar has shut down LNG production. And the driver the administration does not want you to focus on, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, is simultaneously easing sanctions on Russian oil, giving India permission to buy sanctioned Russian crude, suggesting even more Russian oil could be unsanctioned. At the exact moment American policy is destroying Middle Eastern oil supply, American policy is handing Russia, the country reportedly helping Iran target American forces, a massive windfall by allowing it to fill the gap. Senator Chris Murphy tweeted, quote, oil is surging, ships are burning in Hormuz, Iran is mining the strait, and the administration's response is to ease sanctions on Russia so Putin can sell more oil at higher prices. Russia is helping Iran target our troops, and we're making them richer. End quote. Let me translate this into the numbers that matter at your kitchen table. At current elevated prices, the average American household is projected to spend an additional $800 to $1,200 per year on gasoline alone. When you add the cascade, food prices driven by diesel and fertilizer costs, airline fares driven by jet fuel, heating, and electricity, economists project the average American family will absorb between $2,000 and $3,500 in additional annual costs as a direct result of this conflict. These costs are falling on the exact families this president swore he would protect. America first. That was the promise. Lower costs, no more wars. Instead, a war with no authorization, oil surging with no ceiling, sea mines in the water, Russia profiting, and the commander-in-chief calling the whole thing a little glitch. If this analysis is connecting dots you have not seen assembled anywhere else, hit subscribe right now. New attacks are happening daily. Oil prices are moving hourly, and I am going to keep breaking it down piece by piece. You need to be here when the next piece drops. Receipt number 3. What the Khamenei injury reveals about the fundamental failure of this war. The fact that first-day strikes reached close enough to the supreme leader to physically injure him tells you two things simultaneously. First, American and Israeli intelligence on Iranian leadership locations was remarkably precise. The targeting was not random. Second, and this is what matters more, it did not work. The decapitation theory failed on day one. Khamenei was injured, not killed, not incapacitated, not removed from power. He emerged with a fractured foot and facial injuries and continued governing. This is the pattern American military planners have failed to learn across decades. You do not break a regime by hitting its leader. You galvanize the population behind that leader. Saddam's statue fell in Baghdad, and the insurgency raged for a decade. Gaddafi was killed in Libya, and the country collapsed into chaos that persists today. Hitting the leader does not end the story. It starts a worse chapter. Senator Tim Kaine stated, quote, "Reports that we struck close enough to injure the supreme leader on day one and still didn't achieve any strategic objective should alarm everyone. It means we threw our hardest punch and it wasn't enough. What's the plan now?" End quote. Congressman Adam Smith, ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, stated, quote, "If our strikes on day one were precise enough to injure the supreme leader and the result is not capitulation but escalation, drone boats, sea mines, attacks on 6 vessels, then the fundamental theory of this war has failed." End quote. An Iran that believes it can absorb the worst America has to offer, can absorb a strike that physically injures its supreme leader, is an Iran that has no incentive to surrender. The psychological ceiling has been broken, the worst has happened, and they are still here, still fighting, still mining the strait, still launching drone boats, still dictating the tempo of a war they did not start. So what does all of this mean for you? It means the war is not ending. The theory that overwhelming force would produce quick capitulation has been disproven. Iran absorbed a strike that injured its supreme leader and responded with sea mines, drone boats, and attacks on 6 vessels. If that did not produce surrender, no additional bombing will either. This war is going to be long, and every day it continues, the costs compound. It means oil prices have no visible ceiling. The strait is mined. Drone boats are in the water. Insurers are pulling coverage. Shipping lines are rerouting. Every one of those dynamics pushes oil higher. And every dollar reaches your gas pump, your grocery store, your utility bill. It means the sea mines are not going away quickly. Mine clearance is one of the most dangerous and time-consuming military operations. Clearing the Strait of Hormuz could take weeks or months, even after a ceasefire. The mines stay. The disruption stays. The price impact stays. It means every adversary on earth is watching. Iran absorbed the hardest American punch, saw its leader injured, survived, and escalated with asymmetric weapons shutting down global oil supply. That lesson will be studied in every military academy on the planet. You do not need to match American firepower. You need to make American wars so economically devastating that the public turns against them. Let me outline 3 scenarios for where this goes. Scenario 1, negotiated stand-down. Back-channel pressure produces a ceasefire framework. Iran, having demonstrated it can mine the strait, deploy drone boats, survive strikes on its supreme leader, and drive oil prices toward historic levels, agrees to stop, but on terms that look nothing like unconditional surrender. Hormuz reopens gradually as mine clearance proceeds. Trump declares total victory regardless. Caroline Leavitt already previewed the framing, quote, "Unconditional surrender means whatever the president determines it means. But the structural damage is permanent. Tehran's regime is stronger and more hardline. Russia has profited enormously. Gulf states have begun diversifying away from American security guarantees toward China, toward India, toward anyone not currently setting the region on fire. The off-ramp exists. The road behind it is scorched. Scenario 2, economic catastrophe. The strait remains contested. Mines stay in the water. Drone boat attacks continue. Oil pushes past 150, approaches 200. The global economy enters a supply shock recession. Gas prices hit $7 to $9 a gallon. Food prices spike as transportation and fertilizer costs cascade through every supply chain. The Federal Reserve is trapped. Raise rates and crash the economy, or hold rates and watch purchasing power evaporate. Working families absorb the full weight of a war they never voted for, never authorized, and never wanted. The administration, trapped in its own rhetoric of total victory, cannot find an exit without admitting failure, so it escalates, and the cycle feeds itself. Scenario 3, the ground war. NBC confirmed the president has privately expressed interest in deploying ground forces inside Iran. Ground troops against 90 million people whose supreme leader just survived an American strike and became a national hero. Ground troops in waters filled with sea mines. Ground troops where Russia provides targeting intelligence to the other side. The feedback loop activates. Escalation generates scrutiny. Scrutiny forces document releases, Epstein files, DOJ records, congressional subpoenas. Documents generate propaganda that Iran broadcasts globally. Propaganda demands more military distraction. The exits disappear, the costs become generational, and the purpose of the war becomes indistinguishable from one man's desperate need to control the narrative of his own presidency. Here is what I keep coming back to. An American-led strike on day one was precise enough to fracture the foot of Iran's supreme leader and cut his face. That is an extraordinary military achievement, and it produced the exact opposite of the intended result. The leader survived. The regime hardened. The population unified. And Iran responded by mining the most important waterway on Earth, deploying drone boats against commercial shipping, and driving oil prices toward levels that will reshape the global economy. That is not a war being won. That is a war whose fundamental assumptions have collapsed, and the rubble is falling on you, on your gas prices, on your grocery bills, on your retirement accounts, on the service members whose safety the president called a stupid question. 6 ships hit, drone boats in the water, sea mines in the strait, an injured supreme leader who emerged stronger, oil surging with no ceiling, and a commander-in-chief who called all of it a glitch and showed up to a military funeral wearing merchandise. So I will leave you with this. If the opening strike was powerful enough to injure the supreme leader, and the result is not surrender but escalation, what exactly is the plan for tomorrow? When drone boats are ramming cargo ships and sea mines sit in the shipping lanes your economy depends on, is this still a little detour? When every dollar of surging oil reaches your gas pump, your grocery aisle, and your heating bill, who is paying for this war? Is it the people who started it, or is it you? And when the world watches a supreme leader survive an American strike, stand back up with a fractured foot, and mine the strait that controls 1/5 of global oil, what does that tell every adversary on Earth about the limits of American power? Drop your answers in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe, because the next chapter, whether it is $200 oil, ground troops, the mine clearance that could take months, or the economic shock already reshaping your family's budget, is coming fast. This story is not slowing down. Do not look away.